LngVrsn is my name, and I will be moderating a podcast, a video podcast, which is about a newly published book titled Common People's Uganda, authored by Professor Yash Tandon. And to make us understand this book is a panel of four intellectuals and activists of different generations, and they are here with me, and I will request them to introduce each other very briefly as we move forward. Professor, please.
Well, I'm Yash Tandon, the author of the book.
I'm Edward Rumayo, a friend of Tandon and a reader of the book.
I'm Jane Narunga. I'm also a reader of the book, which I enjoyed very much.
Thank you.
I am Africa. She's a young man.
Thank you. We want to get a brief introduction and overview of the book as we move forward, but maybe we may have to start like this. I would like to take this opportunity to ask Professor Yash Tandon. Reading through the book, one finds that it uses a Marxist materialist approach to analysis. Professor, how relevant is that approach or analysis to the contemporary issues, particularly in Uganda?
The Marxist-Leninist approach is one of dialectical materialism. In other words, it's an interaction between the material world and the intellectual world, the mind and the matter. And Marx wrote about it, as you know, a long time ago. But that is simply a diagnostic tool, an analytical tool. It has a vision of the future, an idealistic vision, but Marx combined this method with historical materialism. In other words, he applied that methodology to analyze the whole historical period from ancient times to today, and has made some very little predictions about the future. Now, that methodology can be used by us, but we have to put that in our proper context. I would say that we have to contextualize the methodology, and basically our situation is that we are still not independent country. We are a neo-colony, and very different from Russia, very different from China. We are a neo-colony. All these years, we have thought that we were independent for the last 57 years. We were politically independent, but we own nothing. Our people own nothing of the resources of our country. Not only that, we don't even own the policies. The result is that because we don't own the resources, we don't even have now political independence. So that's what we are.
Professor, let's move forward now. I think you have tried to convince us that this framework of analysis is relevant to Uganda, and you used it to analyze the history and the contemporary period in Uganda and the way forward as how Uganda can overcome its challenges. So briefly, can you give us an overview of the book, Common People's Uganda, to put us in the context?
The book is in three parts. Part one, very short part, about 50-60 pages, is the historical context, pre-colonial, colonial, up to 1986. That includes all that the Obote, Amin, UNLF, and the second Obote.
And the next?
And then the second section is on the present situation, 1886 onwards. And that I have analyzed in some detail, the economic, the political, army, and so on. And then there's a third section, which for me is most important, and what I call rebooting revolution. How do we restart the revolution that had begun in our country in fighting against the colonial powers before independence? rebooting revolution. It's in great detail on how to move forward. We'll come to that later on.
Yes.
And then, because the book was finished in end of 2018 and published only this month, I have taken that opportunity to update the book, and therefore I have an epilogue at the end, which talks about three particular things. One is two books that I have reviewed, and the second is the Bobby wine phenomenon.
Thank you. And in 2 sentences, what is the title? What about the title?
Well, the
Briefly?
title briefly is followed from what we used to have called Common Man's Charter during Obote's time, and I have simply changed the word man to people, so that it is people-oriented, not just one sex.
Thank you. We shall come back later to you to give us more insights into the book. Professor Gumayo, I noticed that you wrote forward to this book, Common People's Uganda, and you recommended it to us, to the audience, to read it, that it is a very helpful book. What did you find helpful in this book?
Thank you, Professor Musa. I found it very useful because it tells the history of Uganda's evolution from way back colonialism to where we are at the moment, and actually gives us the opportunity to reorganize this country, to own it, because the book says very clearly that it's not about the history of Uganda, it is about the future of Uganda. So I like it because it's a book that should be read by all. There are questions at the back of every chapter, at the end of every chapter. It is actually designed to be a study manual which can lead to action. So my hope is that this book is read widely by a new generation, discussed, disseminated, and then, this is the most important thing, find a way of implementing its ideas and recommendations.
Thank you. We shall come back to you to find out more about those relevances you are talking about. Let's go to the next panelist, Madam Jane Narunga. You are an NGO activist, and you are in advocacy work. How do you find this book relevant for your advocacy work?
Thank you so much, Mr. Mwambusia. Maybe to add on to the attributes you have said about advocacy and the activist, we also work on trade issues and issues broadly, issues of the economy. What I liked about this book is that it puts family back on the agenda, the issue of the empire, neocolonialism, the issue of the institutions such as IMF, World Bank, WTO, which are dictating policies on us. This is a debate which has been put aside in Uganda. In fact, when IMF invites us, we go, we tell them, you see now that our budget, we don't have money for our budget, there is corruption in our country. They say, yes, we'll be able to help you. This is now the debate. And I remember way back around the Jubilee campaign, talking about the odious debt. Today, we are indebted even far more than we have ever been indebted before. But we are not looking at IMF, World Bank. In fact, these are the institutions which are telling us, no, you are okay, because you haven't reached the 50% of GDP. There is that level of engagement, consciousness is not there. So what I like about this book is that it's now firmly back on the agenda. And like Professor Gumayo is saying, we need to read it, but also implement. Read it, understand it, and also implement it. If we are talking about the empire, talking about neo-colonialism, we need to understand its manifestations, debate around what are the manifestations of the empire and be able to engage effectively. But lastly, another area which I liked so much about the questions, it also goes into other fundamental issues like decentralization. It questions whether decentralization is working. And I think this is also another area which we need to engage on, debate. Is this kind of decentralization the way to go or not? So there are so many other areas I think which are really important, but I go back to what Professor was saying. We need to read it, analyze it, debate, let us debate what's in this book.
Thank you. Mr. Chiza Africa, you are among the category of the youth, and these days the youth are talking about people's power, people's ownership. Do you find this book, Common People's Uganda, talking to the youth?
Thank you, Chair, Moderator. Yes, and the fact is that the current generation with the youth, there has been, I don't want to use the word propaganda, but there has been that whole gospel that trying to show that history of Uganda started in 1986. That is that has been always the perception, that the liberation of Uganda started in 1986. But the book tries to bring the whole history way back, to the Kakonge and all that, the Moshi Conference, the Nairobi Conference, all that. It brings that to show where Uganda has gone, because nation building is a process. And with the youth, unless we really understand what it took to build the Uganda we have today, way back, I think we cannot help. But then another amazing thing which I find in the book is the distinction between President Museveni as the prince of the mustard seed and President Museveni as the Machiavellian. As a youth, I am making 29 this year, and I have known only one president, President Museveni. But when I was growing up, I could know whenever the president was to visit, that was a public holiday. People could trek kilometers and miles to come and see the president, voluntarily sing him songs and all that. Things have changed now. The common man has awoken up. I mean, the youth have come to realize that the president they used to sing praises, that used to be the liberator, is no longer really the same person. So yes, it speaks volumes, and I think it is a book I would really ask every youth, whether you belong to any political party or political sense or belonging, I think it is a good book that really can help tell the story of what change we want. Because it also raises the aspects of what the Bobby phenomenon should also explore. Not only the explosion of Bobby's glory, but they need to understand that structure needs also to be tackled.
Thank you. Let's go back to Professor Yash Tandon, the author of the book. Reading through the book, one finds that actually you are not only writing about the struggles of other people in Uganda, which you have done, but you are also part and parcel of this struggle. You are part of this struggle, and you have been in these struggles for quite a number of years, since the 1960s. But we don't seem to have undergone the transformation, the promise that was made against poverty, ignorance, and diseases, which was promised since the 1960s. What fresh ideas are found in this book that can create a nucleus around which society can now transform? Or which fresh ideas have you brought in this battle of ideas in Uganda today in this book?
That's a very important strategic question. My last chapter before the epilogue deals with that, rebooting the revolution. And you use a very important word, transformation. Now, that word has been, I noticed that that word has been caught on in the media, and some of the parties are talking about transformation. That's very good. And I think we need to give substance to that word transformation. What does that mean? First of all, what transformation means is to understand our reality that we want to transform. Why is this existential, the reality out there, so destructive of not only our economy but the lives of the common people? We have to understand that. Second thing we have to understand is our analytical tools, our diagnostic tools by which we try to analyze what we see ahead of us. We describe that, but see, why is that what we are seeing happening? The diagnostic tool, and that I
So
think,
what is in this book
and that is
that has diagnosed the current challenges or the challenges throughout history?
That is correct. And if I may extend this, we go to a doctor, we describe our symptoms, and the doctor diagnoses, and then he prescribes medicines. Now, what is lacking, I find in the media here, in the parliament here, in the general discussions here, and probably in advocacy too, prescription. You describe and say, okay, we do this. Hey, what is your diagnosis? No. So that's why we have to have a diagnostic tool, Marxist-Leninist diagnostic tool. And therefore...
But Professor, you have used that diagnostic tool in the past. You were here in the 1960s teaching at Makerere University using that diagnostic tool. You were at the University of Dar es Salaam with colleagues in the Great Debate using that diagnostic tool. We are still using that diagnostic tool. Don't you think that maybe that diagnostic tool might also be having challenges?
The diagnostic tool has one very important distinction between material reality and its consciousness of that reality. Since Africa mentioned Museveni talks about power from the barrel of a gun. Okay? And we in UNLF also tried this.
Or Mao said it and Museveni picked it from Mao.
No, he didn't.
Yes.
He didn't understand Mao at all. At all. Because when Mao did it, he marched, long march, and he developed the consciousness of the people. So when the gun was used for a short period to throw out that previous government, the people took over, and you had a communist system. When Castro picked the gun, the masses were conscious of that. So gun can be used only short period in order for people who have been suppressed all these years, or these decades, to take over power. Now, our friend Museveni thinks that barrel of a gun will automatically produce revolution. No, it doesn't.
So you are saying that sometimes these frameworks we pick from outside and apply it in different contexts do not apply exactly, because President Museveni and other revolutionaries in Africa have always picked those frameworks of analysis and those phrases like power comes from the barrel of the gun, or President Museveni, who actually was a student at the University of Dar es Salaam and used the framework analysis of Fanon, of how violence liberates, and comes to apply it in Uganda, but it seems it does not apply exactly as it was conceived by Fanon and can be applied wrongly. So in your book here, how are you applying Marxism so relevantly that it does not remain Marxist-Leninist, which came about 200, 100 years ago?
Well, first of all, I must say that Museveni hasn't really understood Marxism-Leninism at all. He was always a militarist. He used to stay at my house, sorry to be personal, but magazines he had was all about bombs and weapons of war and guns and so on, everything about that. So he went to Mozambique in order to only understand how to use the gun, okay? Now I want to put into this my knowledge that comes from experience, because experience is the basis of knowledge, okay? We in UNLF okay, had also thought that perhaps we might liberate certain area, which we did after we were thrown out of Uganda in 1980. And in Kitale, we had 300, 400 people, okay, under arms, try to see whether we can apply that Cuban example. We found that our soldiers were taking food from the peasants because, of course, they had nothing to eat. And then we had a meeting. Gumayo, Nabudere, Monijo, the generals came from Kitale as well. We had a long meeting. We said, no, this can't happen. And we are a Maoist party. And I think we are the only Maoist party in the whole world that disarmed our people. And we said we must go back to the roots. We called grassrooting. All this account is there in the book. Grassrooting strategy. So
that grassrooting is in this book.
Yeah, Gumayo went back to
the audience will read it and see that one.
Yeah, Gumayo went back to Fort Portal, Nabudere to Mbale, Omonijog to Karamoja, and I was in exile in Zimbabwe. But namely, we must first bring the consciousness of the people.
So this book is about also bring about the consciousness of the people,
exactly,
so that people participate in their struggle and emancipation, and they are not merely participated. Professor Edward Rugumayo, you have been here, you have seen it all. You were, I think, a civil servant, then you were a minister in Amin's government. You were actually more or less the speaker of the National Consultative Council during the UNLF government. You were a speaker. And later on, you participated in the NRM government as a minister. But it seems as if we have not achieved this transformation. And since you have been participating at those higher levels of the state, and we don't seem to have achieved the fundamental change, as it were, or have not had a transformation, although there has been some change and some growth, we have not had really a transformation. What do you think went wrong? And particularly, how does Yash Tandon bring out this fresh in this book? Because otherwise, there are critics who can say that doing the same thing over and over and over again and expect a change is actually madness. So what do you think is in this book that gives us fresh ideas as to how to move forward? Because it seems we have been marking time for a long time. Professor.
Now you are really bringing very interesting questions. We are marking time because of the very nature of the protracted struggle to get out of the clutches of the empire.
What is this empire?
Now the empire, I'm glad you asked that. The empire is what we call now in the language, the Washington Consensus. That's where they say government has no role in the economy. Its job is just to govern and let everything be privatized. In a simple man's language. Now, we fell for that. We completely deindustrialized. And then we sold our assets, not to Uganda, because Uganda didn't have the money, to foreigners. So our economy is a captive economy. It's gone. We do not control it at all. Why do I say this? You look at the privatized sector, education. The private schools are expensive and they teach better than public schools. The hospitals, as you know, they lack medicine, or the medicine is stolen, drugs, and the private hospitals are too expensive for ordinary people.
So what is the way forward?
The way forward is precisely what this book says, to transform, to bring back what belongs to the people of Uganda. And this will be a protracted struggle to bring back what belongs to the resources, Listen, the resources, the media, and why do I say this? Look carefully. Our whole debate in the newspapers does not focus on the principal contradiction between us and capital.
Professor, you seem to be now again taking us back to the blaming of colonialism and imperialism. Let me ask this. And there are those who say that, but we have been independent for more than 5 decades. And there was that talk in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, how the West, how Europe underdeveloped Africa. But there are also those who are saying that maybe a new book should be written about how Africans have underdeveloped Africa. What is your take on that?
Well, definitely, I fully agree with that idea, because when you're not in charge of your home, someone runs it. You know that one? When you're not in charge of your home, someone runs it. And we're not in charge of our countries, of Uganda.
The government says they are in charge. They fought imperialism.
But imperialism with us, you know it.
So that's your take.
That's my take.
Thank you.
And the whole of this book, I go back to. That's why we need to reread, to reboot.
Thank you. Madam Jane Narunga, before you went into this activism, you were a historian. You taught even history at Makerere University. And Professor Ashton in this book is also using a historical approach, part of historical approach. What is your take on the challenges of history in Uganda? What lessons can we learn from history? What does this book also tell us from the lessons we are learning from history? Because it seems as if in Uganda, we have learned history, but we don't learn from history. So how can we learn from history and do things better than we have been doing them? It seems we have been doing the same things, learning history, but not learning from history.
We haven't even learned history. We haven't. You know, yesterday...
So you are dismissing people like me who is a historian?
No, maybe a few of you. You are not representative of the whole population. Yesterday, we were discussing with young people at FES. Young people.
FES is what?
Frederick Ebert Stiftung,
yes.
The foundation. The young people have a youth program, youth what program, but they bring together the youth. And here she was asking these youth, do you know Kakong? How many people know Kakong? People knows. Who knows Musaz? Everybody. Who knows Nabudere? And a young man says, I know him because he's from my place. You know?
So, I wish Professor had also asked, who knows Napoleon?
France.
She did
that.
She did.
So when I was giving some closing remarks, I asked, and everybody knew Marie Antoinette, Louise, Bismarck, Napoleon. They are the ones who said Napoleon, and everybody laughed. You see, we don't know our history. And I told them yesterday, if you don't know where you are coming from, you can't know where you want to go, you know? And that's the truth. And I think for you and Prof, who are still in the universities, we need to put back our history. We need to learn. We need to change our education system. We need to know where we are coming from, our history. And I think this book brings that out clearly, you know, there is a lot to learn from our past. For example, the alliance between Bunyoro, alliance between Bunyoro and Uganda, very strong alliance to fight against a common enemy. Our children, they don't know that. They don't. And like this young man was saying, I understand. They want to do history starting from 1986. But we go far back, you know. And there are so many interesting books which I want to recommend to the young people. Karijile wrote a very good book, showing even the trade, you know, how we used to trade, you know, between the Baganda, the Batoro, the Banyoro, with sword and bucklers and spears made by us, horse and, you know, iron. Bunyoro was good at making iron. So we need to learn We don't know our history.
Thank you. And as we have been told by the author, actually in this book, it actually uses a historical approach and the dialectical approach, and therefore there is a lot of history here, especially the history of Uganda National Liberation Front government, which is rarely known in Uganda. I think it is recommended that people get this book and read that history, because unless you know where you came from and where you are coming from, you may not where you are, and you may not know where you are going. Let's move forward to Mr. Chiza African. There is one revolutionary, Franz Fanon, one revolutionary of independent Africa about emancipation. There is a famous quote from him when he says that every generation must identify its mission, either fulfill it or betray it. You, the youth of today, from this analysis of books like this one of Professor Yash Tandon, you seem not to be taking the mantle or taking the bull by the horns, as it were. But from what is happening in Uganda today, and from the epilogue of Professor Yash Tandon's book, he seemed to be saying, if the youth have woken up, is it true the youth have woken up and have identified the mission and they are going to fulfill it, or you are going to betray it?
Thank you, moderator. Of course, I would like to underscore the fact that yes, we live in a knowledge economy, but unfortunately, there is a lot of knowledge capture, especially when Professor Tandon talks about the empire. Much of the knowledge out there is really praising the empire. There's less that is. But to the question of political independence, really we need to talk about political independence of Uganda and the role of the youth. Today morning, just in the New Vision, His Excellency the President was talking about the fact that poverty is a national crisis now. That there's a need to tackle poverty because it's a national crisis. And then you start wondering really, and if you look at the comments that were coming in, a lot of men were youths saying, wait, after 32 plus years, you're really realizing that poverty is a national crisis. What I'm trying to say is that with the good enough what we have, what the generation of Professor Yash Tandon and the Professor Gumayo did not have, maybe probably also your generation moderator, is we have internet. We have social media. We are able to mobilize. We may no longer have to take power through the barrel of the gun, but we have the tool which actually goes even way beyond the borders. We have seen many instances where there's a crackdown on for example, on protests, peaceful protests, but we end up using internet to even get in touch with people in the diaspora, because the question of the diaspora is really very important in nation building. So I do believe that yes, the youth have a very big role to play, and we are awake. Of course, I would still want to underscore the fact that yes, we need to have our ideology, what defines us. That is still lacking. In my assessment, really, we the youth feel to see the only threat to Uganda, the only question of Uganda's challenges as the president. Not to, okay, after him on what next? So we need to know what identifies us. Is it a proactive state, a developmental state? Is it the values of maybe African democracy? Because I don't believe truly in Western democracy. We were democratic. Uganda is one of the kingdoms that were democratic in history. If we read the history of Uganda, it had those aspects of democracy, central government, and yes, it had those values.
We discussed that.
Yes. So, but that is the issue. We are awake, and we have a good tool to use, but we need to also have a sense of belonging. What identifies us?
Do you find the youth in Uganda informed in their activism and their politics? Are they informed by the greater good and common good principle and ideology, or they have been captured by the ideology of capitalism and individualism, and they are pursuing individual selfish interest rather than pursuing the greater good, and the common good as informed by materialist history and Marxist history?
That's a very good question, and it takes me back to what the late Oginga Odinga wrote in his Not Yet Uhuru. The fact that whenever in the newly independent Africa, whenever politicians could go into power, they would term it as falling into things. You know, in Uganda we call it a good movie in two. You know, means like you are falling into things, and unfortunately, that is what the tragedy that might befall, that the seeming tragedy of the young generation in politics.
What is that one?
Yes, the aspect of what I might still call primitive accumulation of wealth. Yes, it is still primitive in that you are having vast rich politicians and absurd, poor voters. Parliament to date, as we are passing the next financial year, Parliament is proposing to add on its allowances, its salaries, by 40%. But we the youth, we the voters, my grandmother in the village, because it is saying that the standards of living have increased, inflation has risen and all that. But we the people, it's as if inflation is not affecting us. It is as if it's only affecting them. That's the question that they are focusing really on, like Jim was saying, eating, amassing. And what do the voters get? After some time, you get it. And that's what the youth really, I would like to call on the youth to
I just wanted to intervene on the issues facing the youth, the challenges. But you see, when you look at this new generation, these people, we haven't prepared them. Just look at the education system, nothing, no debating ideas, there is no ideology. So we are not passing on to them anything. What they are seeing today, what he's talking about in Parliament, amassing wealth. So they are also, most of them, by the way, they are saying it's now our turn to eat. We the youth want to be there to do what? They don't know. And for me, I think when you look at the epilogue, you raise these questions. What do we do? Because there is a potent force there. How do we mold that force? When you talk about ideology, these young people are not going to have it. They have to be directed somehow.
Professor Yash Tandon, the author of the book, you have talked about the empire. What can be done to make sure that the empire control and its local allies are overwhelmed by the common people so that we find a different direction?
We begin with the dialogue.
We begin with the dialogue.
Yes.
The dialogue space.
We begin with the dialogue.
Who will give us the space?
Wait. I have in this book mentioned this thing.
Okay.
I refer to the Juko Tindifa report, A People's Dialogue, Political Settlements in Uganda and the Quest for National Conference. And therefore I say that our generation, including yours and mine, but our generation should open up the door to those who are below 40. Anybody over 41, out.
Thank you. That is Professor Yash Tandon. And on that note, I think that ends on a good note. The book is here, Common People's Uganda, so that we have got a debate, a battle of ideas. Rather than going to the bush, we can go to the libraries, we can go to conference centers, we can go to seminars and the battle there so that something new, something progressive may come. But to do that, we need the space. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.